Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode of these mini World Championship preview and predictions, these special Beckman's breakdown episodes. Yesterday, if you did watch it when it went out live, I looked at the mixed doubles, gave you my thoughts on the draw as well as some predictions. Today, it's all about the women's doubles, and I'll be doing the same sort of structure. I'll be going through each quarterfinal section. Who I think, and I'll reviewing some good matches, some of the pairs, my thoughts on the favourites, etc. Give my prediction for each section, and at the end, I'll obviously do a little quick summary for you all. So, women's doubles in the top quarter. Let me just load it up here. Got the graphic on the screen, but I've got it in front of me just to help, and I've got my trusted notes, which hopefully I can read, because sometimes I do just randomly write them down and it makes absolutely no sense at times. So, top quarter, obviously we have to look at the number one seeds from China, Lu Shengshu and Tan Ning. They've only been beaten twice this year, and that was to Fukushima Matsumoto in the Indonesia Open final. And they also lost their compatriots Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan. They're also the defending champions, and so they are going to be incredibly difficult to beat. Recently in the Japan-China Open, they withdrew after winning the first round in Japan. And I think that was because Tan Ning was struggling with Achilles. But the following week, China, they came back, they played, they finished the tournament, and they won without dropping a single game. So it's very hard to look at anyone to truly beat them. Not just for this quarterfinal section, for their section that I'm going to be looking at, but for the whole tournament. There are certainly some pairs. Obviously, two pairs that have beaten this year are also in the draw, with Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan being in their half. And I think there's actually a pair in their section that I'll get to in a second that I think have a great chance of beating them. And that pair, actually, looking at my notes, that's what I'm going to be talking about next. They have beaten Lu and Tan before. And they've also done very well recently, and that is the number 6 seeds of Kim Hee-young and Kong Hee-young. They beat them in the China Masters last year. It's the only time they've beaten them, the Chinese pair, and it was actually the only time they went to 3. But still, a win is a win. And let's not forget that at the recent Japan Open, so the tournament where Lu Shengshu and Tan Ning withdrew, it was the Koreans that won it in an absolutely epic encounter against another Chinese pair, Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan, ending 30-29 in the third. So they're going to come in with a little bit of confidence. There are some question marks, some small ones. But these question marks were obviously against them at Japan Open. And a big one from that is that Kong Hee-young had only just come back from an injury. She had had ankle surgery earlier in the year. And I think that's a big reason as to why when they played the China Open the following week, they weren't able to perform quite as well. That might also have something to do with the mental and physical toll that the Japan Open did take on them. So it's going to, obviously, with Kong just coming back from an injury, not having played too much tournament play, it might be difficult, especially when you're coming up against the absolute best pair in the world in the shape of Lu and Tan. But Kim Hee-jong is a very smart player. And I feel if there's anyone who can find gaps in the Chinese pair, possibly open up the courts, expose the Chinese slight lack of speed and mobility, maybe even really taking advantage of Tan Ning, who's, I think, was struggling a little bit to move as comfortably as usual in certain situations, it is Kim Hee-jong. And I think what adds to that is that Kong Hee-young does have a lethal attack and is also a very, very experienced player herself. So I think many people will be quite excited, rubbing their hands. I certainly am at that, at being a potential quarterfinal in the top half. It would be quite the match. But this section, this quarterfinal section, isn't just about these two pairs. We can't overlook the Stoeva sisters, the number 9 seeds, very experienced pair, the most decorated European Championship pair, and they also took Lu and Tan to 3 at the Olympics, so they're seeded to face them in the third round. So the fact they've taken them to 3 at a major championships, who knows? They are physically very strong, which means they can go toe-to-toe in a way with the brute force, the speed that the Chinese pair can play at. But I'm not sure that if we look anywhere else, they're actually a good match for the Chinese. They aren't a pair that use the touch and the gaps all too much. But I just think any pair that can trouble Lu and Tan, you need to be able to soak up and go toe-to-toe with them physically to an extent. You can't be too down in that section. I think the Stoevers tick that box, but you need to be able to move them. They're strong girls, are Lu and Tan, but their movement, their agility around the court, their mobility is sometimes can be a little suspect. There are some tactical things that pairs can do and have done, but if you can open out the court and really get them expansive movement, which is not easy to do, then I think you have chances. And that's something where I think the Stoever sisters don't quite have the game. Another pair that we must look out for in this bottom section is the Chinese Taipei pair, the 11th seeds, Su Yinhui and Lin Ji-hyun. They're the 11th seeds, like I said, a capable pair, and had 2 good games with the Koreans in the semi-final of the recent Japan Open. I think it was like 18 and 18. So that's close against a pair that were playing really well. They could potentially be the seeds to play the Koreans in the third. And rounding it out, we can't overlook, I mentioned an American pair in the mixed doubles in the episode from yesterday, but you have Francesca Corbett and Jenny Guy. They've beaten the Taipei pair twice, and they're scheduled to meet in the second round, including once at the recent Canada Open. They got to the semi-finals of the Chinese Taipei Open, which is a very recent tournament, and they've also beaten Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan before, and that was in Indonesia, so the Super 1000. So they've shown that they can go toe-to-toe with some of the top pairs in the world. They can beat them, they can do well, they can get good runs at these big tournaments. I think they're pretty well positioned, to do pretty well. And if they come through their first round, if they can then beat the Taipei pair, the Koreans are going to be tough. But then you're into the tournament, and they're certainly a pair, like I said, that can't be overlooked. But prediction-wise, for this top quarterfinal, I've gone for Lu and Tan. I think it's going to be really difficult. I really like Kim and Kong, and I think they could create an upset. But if I go beyond that, I just feel Lu and Tan will be too strong and are just so hard to bet against. Who's going to bet against a pair that have only lost twice this year and are the defending champions, and even with an Achilles issue, were able to find ways around that and still win without dropping a game? I mean, if you're a betting person, the odds are going to be pretty strong for Lu and Tan. Also, Lu and Tan won in India. Although, when they did win India, they did struggle in the earlier rounds, which could, again, possibly open the doors in the earlier rounds for someone like Kim and Kong. But Lu and Tan are a safer bet. So, moving on to the second quarter, the bottom of the top half, I think Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan are right at the top of the section. They're number 4 seeds and are the clear favourites to make the quarterfinals. The only concern for them, when it comes to fitness-wise, is possibly Jai Fan's back, which she was holding at the end of that epic Japan Open final. They did lose early in China. I do think that possibly was a reason behind that. I haven't heard anything since that it's any more serious than it is, but then again, it's very difficult outside of China to get Chinese news. And I think with their experience, especially Jai Fans, which means she's like a 4-time world champion, it's going to be very difficult to see any pair stopping them before the quarterfinals. That's definitely looking at the top section. You have Sepei Shan and Hong En-zu, who are technically very good and definitely can have their day, but I think it's going to be difficult. It'll be quite the upset if they are able to beat Jai Fan and Zhang Shushan. The bottom part of this quarterfinal for me is quite interesting. You have Iwanaga and Nakanishi, Lauren Lam and Alison Lee of America. They're the 2 seeded pairs. And then there's the home favourites, Teresa Jolly and Gayatri Gopichand. For the Japanese pair, they've been okay consistency-wise, but Iwanaga has had issues with her shoulder this year. They withdrew in the quarterfinals of the Singapore Open against Lu and Tan, but they have played since. So whilst I think if it was any normal day, I probably would have the money on them, definitely. I think those issues, they're not having the, I think with Iwanaga's shoulder injury, it's a bit trickier for them. For the Americans, Lauren Lam and Alison Lee, they've had some very good results. Another American pair, they've got 2 great women's doubles pairs doing very, very good things. It certainly is an exciting time for Pan Am Badminton. They beat Baek Hana and Lee So-hee in Japan. They're the two-time Pan Am champions, semi-finals Malaysian Masters, and have had some other good results. They always bring a high level of energy. And I think the fact that if I look quickly ahead, the Indian pair, Teresa Jolly and Gayatri Gopichand, they didn't play in Japan and China. I think both have been struggling quite a lot of injuries. They also missed the Uber Cup. Gayatri's been struggling with her back, Teresa with her shoulder. I think this will dampen their chances. They are fierce competitors and could get a boost from the home support. But I think if we control everything in that little bottom section, I think the Americans have a really good chance to come through that section, actually, the more I think about it. The Japanese do have the head-to-head advantage. Obviously, India, Lauren and Alison and Teresa and Gayatri never played each other before, so it's hard to really get a feel on that. Like I said, I think I wrote here, actually, I think it could likely go to form, which means the Japanese pair. But if I had to bet on any pair disrupting that section, it's going to be Lauren Lam and Alison Lee. I think they'll get through because there's so many question marks against the Indian pair and their fitness and how much badminton they've been able to play and all those are factors. Whereas Lauren and Alison keep riding high. Every time I watch them, they seem to be getting better. They're getting really good results. They've got that kind of momentum with them. I think Iwanaga and Nakanishi are a little bit open. We saw them at the Uber Cup lose to a very young Malaysian pair. So, like I said, they've had their own injury issues. No really major results stand out in my mind that give them some self-confidence. I think there's a big chance for the American pair. But my overall prediction for this section, it has to be, I said it right at the top, Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan. Yes, I'm going by seeding again. But there is a reason why these players and pairs are seeded 1 to 4. My only doubt on the Chinese pair is the injury to Jai Fan. But there's, like I said, like you can already imagine, there's those concerns for other pairs as well. I do think Zhang and Jia are getting back into a groove. Plus, they haven't lost to a single match to anyone in this section of the draw. Right, top of the bottom half, so the third quarter. If I'm being brutally honest, I think this is the weakest quarter of the women's doubles draw. And I say that even though we have last year's finalists, Malaysia's Pearly Tan and Tina Muralitharan in it. Talking about Pearly and Tina, obviously Pearly suffered a back injury earlier this year, which meant that she missed the Uber Cup. She's still trying to come back to full fitness. They did reach the final in the Taipei Open recently, which will certainly give them a little bit of confidence, but they still lost to a pair who didn't qualify. Although, talking of that pair, which is Mayu Takahashi and Sumire Nakade, they're having a really great 2026. I think Mayu Takahashi is a huge prospect for Japan. And a quick side note, with the recent splitting of Arisa Igarashi and Shihara Shida, I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe this pair splitting. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if they're... the reason I say that is I think because of Igarashi and Takahashi played the Indonesian Masters and got to the final, only didn't win because, well, not to say they would have won the final, but Takahashi was unwell. They did play really, really good badminton together. I think there's scope that we might see that pair forming. But anyway, back to the Malaysians. Pearly has said not long ago that she was only at about 60 to 70%. I think whilst by the time the Worlds come around, she might have gone up a bit. I'm not sure they're going to be high enough to either personally maybe even get through this section and make the medals. I think if they do make the medals, that'd be a huge achievement for them. Struggling to see them making the final again. It is a shame to say that. I think what adds to it is not just Pearly's injury, but the more I watch them over recent months, it really strikes me that Tina seems to be playing with Pearly's injury on her mind and not able to fully focus on her own game. And whilst they are capable, if I was a Malaysian fan, I'd certainly curb my expectations. If I was a Malaysian fan, I'd be going, if they make the medal rounds, that is a huge, huge achievement for them. And I think maybe their near country rivals, Indonesia, possibly could pounce on the situation because the other seeds in that section, Kusuma and Puspitasari, they've had some decent results. Nothing to set the world alight, but still good. And in 2026, it is 1-1 between them and the Malaysians. Both matches, though, happened before Pearlie's injury. So the Malaysians are a little bit down on that. Maybe the Indonesians can strike and make it to the quarter-finals. I also think the two Turkish pairs in this section are also not to be taken lightly, but I still think it's going to be between the two pairs I've already mentioned. In the bottom part of this section, of this draw, of this quarter, the favourites seeding-wise are Beckman and Lee So-hee, but I have my doubts on them because I'm not quite sure which Beckman and Lee So-hee we are going to get. Because in Japan and China, the last two tournaments that they played two completely different styles. If they play like they did in Japan, where they literally played like a couple of statues just wanting to defend all day long, then they're going to struggle. Especially as, the Japanese seeds of Hirakami and Hobara, especially Hobara with her left hand, she has a lethal attack. I don't think the Koreans' defense, as strong as it is, it's not just the fact they go on the defense, but they just do nothing with it. It just takes the pressure off their opponents. They give free rein to a pair like Hirakami and Hobara, or even actually to the other Japanese pair that they'll face before, Osawa and Tanabe. They're going to be in real trouble. But if they bring the Chinese version, or the version they played at the China Open, then with the way this bottom half of the draw is for them, and I'm looking at the whole bottom half, we could see them reach a world final. So for me, if they play like in Japan, we could see them going out second round. And that's the first match they play, possibly the third round. If they don't, and they play like they did in China, I think, because I think with the pairs that are in that bottom half of the whole draw, not just their section, I think they've got a great chance to make the final. I think the two Japanese pairs, I've already kind of touched on them in that section, seem like their strongest matches. Both pairs are making their world debut. Hobara and Hirakami are the stronger. They are obviously seeded and have done well in some events. They reached the semi-finals in Indonesia, which really stood out. But Hobara has also had some great success in the mixed doubles. The Koreans have actually never played Hobara and Hirakami, but they have played Tanabe and Osawa, and they did win that match. Just so you know, if it is the two Japanese pairs, they've never faced each other in international badminton. And if obviously Beckman and Lee So-hee come through and they're facing either of the Malaysian or the Indonesian pairs, they got positive head-to-heads, 4-3 of the Malaysians and 2-0 over the Indians over the Indonesians, although both those were actually in 3 games. So like I said, it backs up the theory that the Koreans are in a really good position. They've got to be happy with this draw. This whole being in the bottom half. I think our main danger pairs for them are in the top half, but it's going to really come down to which Korean version are we going to see. So prediction-wise, I think we're going to see Korea versus Indonesia in the quarterfinals, and if so, my money is still on the Koreans. They have both, like I said, they played twice. Both times have gone to the Koreans, but both have gone to 3 games. Like, again, I'm going to go with the higher seed. I think it's always a slightly safer bet and the experience of the Koreans, but I've really got that question mark over which Beckman and Lee So-hee are we going to see. I do think they have been a little bit fortunate with their draw. Moving on, last quarter of the women's doubles draw. Now, it must be said, the seeds in the top section, or the main seeds, the higher ranked, the 8th seeds of Li Yijing and Luo Zhumin, have not played together all too much this year. I think China have been testing out some new pairings, but when they have played together, they've actually had some really good success. They won the Asia Championships, and at the recent China Open, they reached the semi-finals as well, pushing Fukushima and Matsumoto all the way, which is the pair that they would actually be playing or seeded to face for a chance at getting amongst the medals. That will be the sternest test, I think, for the Japanese second seeds, obviously, if that comes to fruition. Actually, if I quickly do just imagine that it is the Chinese pair of Li and Luo versus Fukushima and Matsumoto. Those two pairs have actually traded back-to-back wins. Say I think the Japanese won the first one, then the Chinese, and so forth. It's kind of gone back and back forth and back forth. The last time they faced it was the Japanese pair that won. So if you're a little bit of a superstitious person, you might think that it's the Chinese turn to win. I'm not sure if the Japanese are superstitious, if Mai or Yuki are. If they are, then that certainly will play on their mind a little bit if they are to face the Chinese pair. Now, in the bottom section, yeah, Fukushima and Matsumoto should come through. They got absolute buckets of experience. Fukushima has been in 3 world finals. Matsumoto has won the title 2 times, both times beating Fukushima. Then just got to rank of world number 2, been super consistent at the biggest events. But there are some interesting pairs in that bottom section for them. Not to say, well, there's 2 specifically, not to say that the Japanese should not come through, but firstly, you have obviously the seeds of Febby, Seti and Ingram and Rachel Rose. I really like Seti and Ingram as a player. I think she is actually, personally for me, physically got so much better. She looks a lot slimmer, a lot fitter, and I think that's really helped her game. Women's doubles, incredibly tough. You can't, I think you need to be in physically very good shape unless you've got plenty of other skills. The Japanese did easily beat this pair, the Asian Championship this year, but the Indos have had good wins against some other pairs, beating Zhang Shan and Jai Fan. They also got to the quarterfinals at the China Open, semi-finals, the Indonesia Open, and a few other semi-finals earlier in the year too. So they're a bit like the other Indonesian pair, both in this bottom half of the section. They are ones you cannot take lightly. They can certainly spring surprises. I'm quite excited to see the very young pair of Carmen Ting and Ong Jing-yi. They pushed Lu and Tan at the Uber Cup. When China defeated Malaysia 3-0, I called that match and it went to 3 games. They certainly have the skills and they will put their life, body and soul on the line. I can't remember which one of the 2 it was. It might have been Carmen, but one of them, I think, dived about 100 times in that match. Very young pair, very talented. They beat Sayaka Hobara and Ruru Hirokami, in Indonesia, so they have potential. And I think actually everyone else in that section, you've got the Hong Kong pair, the Scottish pair, and even the Ukrainian pair, they were all good and can play decent badminton. But I do think the Japanese pair should come through. Now, prediction-wise, I think it's hard for me to see it not being between the 2 highest seeds, Fukushima Matsumoto versus Lee and Luo. If I was a superstitious person, I'd say the Chinese person because of that thing with the trading wins, with Japanese winning the last one. But both pairs fell in the 3rd round last year to pairs ranked below them. The Japanese pair lost to the Stoeva sisters, and Lee and Luo lost to Iwanagi and Nakanishi. So I think both pairs are going to see this as a great opportunity to get into the medals. And both pairs actually earlier this year, when they played the India Open, both of them lost to Lu and Tan. Lee and Low in the quarters, Fukushima and Matsumoto in the finals. I told you, the more you look into this, the more it's just so hard to kind of pick. But I think I'm going to go for the Japanese pair. Again, I've gone for as 4 from 4, the top seeds. There's going to be some people that are just going to go, Ben, you just went for the top 4 seeds. But, like I said to you in my other episode, and I'm sure it's going to come up in future ones, they're the top seeds for a reason. I think just overall they've been more consistent and individually they have more World Championship experience. I think also their level compared to last year at the Worlds is much higher. I think Lee and Low have improved a bit, but they're quite similar, whereas Fukushima and Matsumoto, I think, have really kind of, especially over, they had a good start at the start of last year, but I think after those World Championships, they've just really fucking risen and got stronger and stronger as a pair. And I think many people, not just because they're second seeds, are seeing them as the ones that can possibly upset Lu and Tan at these World Championships. What I will say, though, talking of looking further ahead as the tournament as a whole for this Japanese pair, I do think Matsumoto needs to be in her creative, proactive, attacking mood. She can sometimes sit back and kind of she's got such a strong forearm, such strong skills. She's so powerful. She's tall. She's got great technique. But sometimes you can just sit back and just almost just rely on it. I think she's best when she is a bit more proactive in a game. You can say that about most players, but for someone like her who has such weapons, I think it's such a huge thing. And if they're going to try and beat the absolute best pairs, I can't remember off the top of my head if they do play Baek and Lee. I think the Koreans have a better head-to-head. That's kind of what's in my mind. they're going to have to really be on it. Yeah, like I said, I think sometimes sitting back can be Matsumoto's undoing. I noticed that more so when she played with Nagahara. I think if she's on it and Fukushima does what Fukushima does, then I think this pair could be the world champions. If not, if Matsumoto is in kind of sit back mode, then yeah, a medal I think is still well within their grasp, but it won't be gold. And that's the last thing that I'll say about that. So anyway, that's it for the women's doubles. As with the previous episode, please do let me know your thoughts on my predictions, as well as who you think is going to come through the different sections of the draw, your thoughts on any of the pairs. You can always add more context. I don't profess to know absolutely everything. I might have missed a report on this injury or this happening or that happening. I really like it when people in the comments add far more context. It's always really cool. I'm always trying I always read them. I try to reply, and it just means that I'm learning more, and I want to learn more. Badminton, personally, not to go on a bit of a tangent here, but if I compare it to tennis, most people just follow the singles. So 2 disciplines. So the men's and women's singles. Of course, they're doubles pairs, but it's not quite got the same. Badminton has 5 disciplines that are all got their own players, styles. You don't see singles players really playing doubles. Or even sometimes these days you don't really see doubles players playing mixed. So there's so much more. And with, I think, the level of badminton growing and the depth in all disciplines, it's really hard to keep on top of absolutely everything and know everything about all the players. It's something that it can be sometimes quite overwhelming. So I love it when people in the comments go, Ben, I read this, I'm from Korea, and I read this article on this thing that happened at the training camp, and I think it might affect their chances. And you're like, wow, that's really cool. I've had people that know, obviously I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if this episode or the last one, that Chinese media is sometimes hard to get outside of China. You have your own TikTok, you have your own social medias. Some people go, oh yeah, well, in Chinese media, this. And it's honestly, I absolutely love it. So please add more of that in the comments section. It's not obviously going to change my predictions, but well, not for the video, but it might change my opinion before. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching this episode. I will see you tomorrow, where I'm going to be talking about the men's doubles. That will be episode 3 in this 5-part series looking at all of the World Championship draws. Until then, see you later.